London, England, spring of 1815. The city awakens to a world forever changed by the end of the Napoleonic Wars. Victory has brought prosperity to some, while others struggle in the shadows of magnificence. The cobblestone streets echo with the clip-clop of elegant carriages carrying the aristocracy to their morning engagements, while common folk hurry along the sidewalks, eyes downcast, knowing their place in the rigid hierarchy that governs every aspect of English society. In the heart of Mayfair, the grand Ashworth mansion stands as a testament to centuries of noble bloodline and accumulated wealth. Its Georgian facade gleams white in the morning sun, while perfectly manicured gardens stretch beyond wrought iron gates that separate the privileged from the masses. Inside these walls, protocol reigns supreme, and every gesture, every word, every glance is calculated according to rules established by generations of aristocratic tradition. The drawing room of Ashworth House embodies the essence of Regency elegance. Silk-covered walls and pale blue complement furniture crafted from the finest mahogany, while crystal chandeliers cast dancing rainbows across Persian carpets that cost more than most families see in a lifetime. Fresh flowers arranged in Ming vases perfume the air with the scent of roses and jasmine, carefully selected from the estate's private gardens by servants who have devoted their lives to maintaining this world of luxury. Lady Catherine Ashworth moves through this opulent environment like a graceful swan upon a pristine lake. At 22, she embodies everything that Regency society expects from a woman of her station. Her auburn hair is arranged in perfect ringlets according to the latest fashion from Paris, while her morning dress of ivory silk, trimmed with delicate lace imported from Brussels, speaks of wealth that needs no ostentatious display. She carries herself with the poise learned from years of instruction in deportment, dancing, languages, and all the accomplishments deemed necessary for a lady of quality. Yet beneath this facade of perfection, Catherine harbors a restless spirit that yearns for something beyond the prescribed boundaries of her existence. As she stands by the tall windows overlooking the bustling street below, her green eyes reflect a longing that no amount of wealth or social position can satisfy. She watches the common people hurrying about their daily business with an intensity that would shock her family, who view the lower classes as little more than necessary inconveniences in the grand theater of aristocratic life. "Catherine, my dear, you mustn't stand so close to the window," chides her governess, Miss Prudence Whitmore, a spinster of 50 whose life has been devoted to molding young ladies into acceptable members of society. "It is most unseemly for a lady of your breeding to be seen observing the street like some common merchant's daughter." Catherine reluctantly steps back from the window, but her gaze lingers on the world beyond. "I was merely watching the people, Miss Whitmore. Surely there is no harm in that." "My dear child," Miss Whitmore replies with the patience of someone who has had this conversation countless times before, "a lady's interests should be confined to matters appropriate to her station. The affairs of the common people are not our concern. Your father has arranged for you to receive visitors this afternoon. Lord Pemberton's son will be calling, and you must prepare yourself accordingly." The mention of Lord Pemberton's son causes Catherine's heart to sink. She has met the young man on several occasions, and while he possesses all the qualities that make him an ideal match in her father's eyes, wealth, title, and impeccable breeding, he lacks the spark of intelligence and passion that Catherine secretly craves. Their conversations consist of polite exchanges about the weather, the latest fashions, and other trivial matters that seem to satisfy society's requirements for courtship but leave Catherine feeling empty and unfulfilled. Lord Edmund Ashworth, Catherine's father, enters the drawing room with the authoritative bearing of a man accustomed to command. At 55, he represents the epitome of aristocratic power, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his posture erect despite the weight of responsibilities that come with managing vast estates and maintaining the family's position in society. His blue eyes, so similar to his daughter's yet hardened by years of political maneuvering and social warfare, survey the room with the practiced gaze of someone who misses nothing. "Catherine," he announces without preamble, "I trust Miss Whitmore has informed you of this afternoon's appointment. Lord Pemberton and his son will be joining us for tea, and I expect you to receive them with the grace and dignity befitting your position." "Yes, father," Catherine replies dutifully, though her heart rebels against the prospect of another tedious afternoon of forced conversation and veiled marriage negotiations. Lord Ashworth approaches his daughter, his expression softening slightly as he observes her evident reluctance. Despite his rigid adherence to social conventions, he genuinely loves Catherine and wants what he believes is best for her future. "My dear, I know these social obligations may seem burdensome, but you must understand that your position in society comes with certain responsibilities. A marriage to young Pemberton would secure not only your future but strengthen the bonds between our families. These alliances have preserved our way of life for centuries." Catherine nods, knowing that arguing would be futile. Her father's word is law in their household, as it is in all matters of aristocratic life. Yet as she agrees to his wishes, she cannot shake the feeling that there must be more to existence than this elaborate dance of social positioning and strategic marriages. The morning progresses with its usual routine of lessons, correspondence, and preparation for the afternoon's social obligations. Catherine's lady's maid, Sarah, a young woman of humble origins who has served the Ashworth family for several years, assists with the careful selection of an appropriate afternoon dress. The chosen garment, a confection of pale yellow silk with intricate embroidery, represents hours of skilled labor by seamstresses who will never be able to afford such luxury themselves. As Sarah arranges Catherine's hair in an elaborate style adorned with ribbons and small pearls, the two women engage in the comfortable conversation that has developed between them over the years. Despite the vast difference in their social positions, Catherine has always treated Sarah with kindness and respect, a quality that sets her apart from many of her peers who view servants as little more than furniture. "Will you be riding in the park today, my lady?" Sarah inquires as she carefully pins a curl into place. "I believe father intends for us to take a turn around Hyde Park after tea, weather permitting," Catherine replies, watching her reflection in the ornate mirror that has reflected the faces of Ashworth women for generations. Lord Pemberton's son is quite fond of displaying his new curricle, and father believes such outings demonstrate our family's continued prosperity and social prominence. Sarah nods understanding, recognizing the subtle undertones of Catherine's words. Having grown up in service, she understands the complex web of motivations that drive aristocratic behavior, the constant need to maintain appearances and reinforce social hierarchies through seemingly casual activities. The grandfather clock in the hall chimes 11, its deep tones echoing through the mansion and serving as a reminder that time moves forward regardless of personal desires or social obligations. Catherine rises from her dressing table, her transformation from restless young woman to perfect lady now complete. She embodies everything that Regency society demands: beauty, grace, accomplishment, and absolute conformity to the expectations of her class. Yet as she prepares to descend to the morning room where her lessons in French and music await, Catherine cannot ignore the voice within her heart that whispers of possibilities beyond the gilded cage of her aristocratic existence. She has read novels that speak of love that transcends social boundaries, of passion that defies convention, but such stories seem as distant and unattainable as the stars that shine beyond her bedroom window each night. The morning lessons pass in their usual fashion, with Catherine demonstrating her mastery of watercolors, her fluency in French conversation, and her skill at the pianoforte. These accomplishments, deemed essential for any lady of quality, serve as weapons in the social warfare that determines which families rise and which fall in the complex hierarchy of the ton. Yet for Catherine, they represent another layer of the elaborate costume she must wear to navigate her prescribed role in society. As the morning draws to a close, Lord Ashworth announces an unexpected change to the day's plans. A problem has arisen with the estate's financial records, requiring the immediate attention of someone skilled in mathematics and accounting. The family's usual secretary has fallen ill, and urgent matters cannot wait for his recovery. "I have arranged for a temporary secretary to review our accounts and ensure everything is in order before tomorrow's meeting with our solicitors," Lord Ashworth explains to Catherine and Miss Whitmore. Mr. Thomas Blackwood comes highly recommended by Lord Harrington, whose own financial affairs he helped organize following some unfortunate investments in shipping ventures. The name means nothing to Catherine, but she notes a slight frown crossing Miss Whitmore's features. "My lord, surely it would be more appropriate to postpone such matters until your regular secretary recovers. Having a stranger in the house, particularly one whose background may not align with our standards." Lord Ashworth waves away her concerns with characteristic authority. Mr. Blackwood's credentials are impeccable, and his discretion absolute. Lord Harrington assured me that despite his humble origins, the man possesses remarkable intelligence and has proven himself trustworthy in matters of the utmost sensitivity. Our financial affairs cannot wait for social proprieties. Catherine finds herself intrigued by this glimpse into a world beyond her usual experience. She has never considered how the vast wealth that supports their lifestyle is actually managed, assuming that such matters simply take care of themselves through some mysterious process that requires no thought on her part. The idea that someone from outside their social circle might possess skills that even her father's position cannot provide sparks her curiosity in a way that afternoon tea with Lord Pemberton's son never could. Thomas Blackwood arrives at Ashworth House precisely at noon, his punctuality reflecting both professional competence and awareness that keeping aristocrats waiting would be an unforgivable breach of protocol. Catherine, who happens to be passing through the entrance hall on her way to the library, catches her first glimpse of this mysterious figure who has so efficiently solved her father's dilemma. He stands perhaps 30 years of age, tall and lean with dark hair that shows evidence of careful grooming despite the obvious economy of his attire. His coat, while well made, lacks the fine tailoring and expensive fabric that marks a gentleman of means, yet he carries himself with a quiet dignity that commands respect. His hands, Catherine notices, bear the slight calluses of someone who has known physical labor, yet they handle the leather portfolio containing his papers with the delicacy of a scholar. What strikes Catherine most profoundly are his eyes, dark brown, intelligent, and completely unintimidated by the opulent surroundings that would overwhelm most people of his station. When their gazes meet across the marble floor of the entrance hall, she feels an unexpected jolt of recognition, as if she has been waiting her entire life to see exactly this face, this expression of quiet strength and unmistakable integrity. Thomas bows appropriately upon seeing her, his manner respectful but not servile. "Lady Catherine," he says, and his voice carries the slight accent that marks him as someone who has risen above his origins through effort rather than birthright. "I am Thomas Blackwood. Your father has engaged my services to review certain financial matters." "Mr. Blackwood," Catherine replies, proud that her voice remains steady despite the strange flutter in her chest. "I trust you will find our household accommodating to your needs." "I am certain I will, my lady. Thank you for your kindness." The brief exchange follows all rules of propriety, yet Catherine senses undercurrents that she has never experienced in her interactions with men of her own class. Thomas treats her with respect due to her position, but his eyes hold no trace of the calculating interest she has grown accustomed to seeing from potential suitors who view her primarily as a pathway to increased wealth and social advancement. Lord Ashworth appears to escort Thomas to the study where the financial records await examination. As the two men disappear down the corridor, Catherine finds herself standing motionless in the entrance hall, her carefully ordered world suddenly feeling less stable than it has ever seemed before. "Catherine, my dear, whatever are you doing loitering in the hall like some servant girl?" Miss Whitmore's sharp voice cuts through Catherine's reverie. "Come along, we must prepare for this afternoon's visitors. Such behavior is most unseemly." Catherine obediently follows her governess, but her thoughts remain with the dark-eyed stranger who has somehow managed to disturb her peace with nothing more than a respectful bow and a few polite words. She finds herself wondering about his life, his background, the experiences that have shaped him into someone who can stand in an aristocratic mansion without being diminished by its grandeur. The afternoon arrives with its prescribed rituals of preparation and anticipation. Catherine, dressed in her pale yellow silk and perfectly coiffed, receives Lord Pemberton and his son in the formal drawing room according to protocols established over generations of similar visits. The conversation flows along predictable channels, comments on the weather, discussion of mutual acquaintances, carefully neutral observations about current events that might affect their social circle. Young Lord Pemberton, a pleasant but unremarkable man of 26, clearly views this visit as a preliminary step toward formal courtship. He compliments Catherine's appearance with studied gallantry, discusses his recent acquisition of a new hunter, and describes his plans for improving his estate's tenant cottages in terms that reveal more concern for their effect on his property values than for the welfare of the families who occupy them. Catherine responds with appropriate interest and ladylike enthusiasm, playing her role in this elaborate social theater with the skill of long practice. Yet beneath her composed exterior, she finds her thoughts repeatedly drifting to the study where Thomas Blackwood works over columns of figures that somehow keep their world functioning. She wonders if he finds satisfaction in his work, if he ever thinks about the lives and luxuries his calculations help maintain. "Perhaps we might take a turn around the park," Lord Pemberton suggests as the afternoon progresses toward its anticipated conclusion. "My new curricle is quite admired, and the weather appears favorable for such an excursion." Lord Ashworth readily agrees to this proposal, recognizing it as an excellent opportunity for the young couple to be seen together by members of society who will duly note and report on this development in the ongoing drama of aristocratic alliances. Catherine acquiesces with appropriate gratitude, though the prospect of displaying herself like some prized thoroughbred holds little appeal. As the party prepares to depart for Hyde Park, Catherine catches a glimpse of Thomas emerging from the study with her father. The two men appear to be engaged in serious conversation, Lord Ashworth nodding approvingly at whatever Thomas is explaining. For a moment, their eyes meet again across the hall, and Catherine feels that same inexplicable stirring that marked their first encounter. Thomas's gaze takes in the tableau before him, Catherine in her expensive afternoon dress, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and privilege, clearly preparing for an outing with the young nobleman who represents everything that Thomas's background denies him access to. His expression remains carefully neutral, but Catherine detects a flicker of something that might be longing before he looks away and returns his attention to Lord Ashworth. The ride to Hyde Park proceeds according to plan, with Lord Pemberton demonstrating his skill with horses and his knowledge of fashionable society gossip. Catherine smiles and nods at appropriate intervals, but her mind remains occupied with thoughts of dark eyes and quiet dignity, of a world where a man's worth might be measured by something other than the antiquity of his bloodline or the size of his bank account. The following days establish a pattern that will prove fateful for all concerned. Thomas's work on the Ashworth financial affairs requires several visits to the mansion, each lasting most of the day as he untangles complex investment records and reorganizes account books that have grown chaotic through years of casual management. His presence in the house becomes a source of both anticipation and anxiety for Catherine, who finds herself inventing reasons to pass through areas where she might encounter him. Their conversations begin innocently enough, brief exchanges about the weather or polite inquiries about his progress with the accounts. Catherine learns that Thomas is largely self-educated, having discovered his talent for mathematics while working as a clerk in a counting house. Through determination and natural intelligence, he has established himself as someone whom even aristocrats trust with their most sensitive financial matters. "My father speaks very highly of your work," Catherine remarks during one such encounter in the corridor outside the study. "He says you have identified several discrepancies that might have caused us considerable difficulty." Thomas inclines his head respectfully. "Your father's affairs are complex but well managed overall. A few adjustments here and there, nothing more. I am grateful for his confidence in my abilities. Surely such work requires considerable skill and knowledge. Have you always been interested in financial matters?" The question reveals Catherine's genuine curiosity about his life, moving their conversation beyond the superficial pleasantries that usually characterize interactions between their respective classes. Thomas hesitates, clearly debating how much honesty is appropriate given their vastly different positions. "I discovered that I possessed a talent for numbers out of necessity, my lady. When one's family depends upon accuracy in such matters for their survival, one learns quickly or suffers the consequences. This glimpse into a world where mistakes carry real consequences rather than minor social embarrassment fascinates Catherine in a way that she struggles to understand. Her own life has been cushioned by wealth and position to such an extent that she has never needed to develop practical skills for survival, yet she finds herself envying Thomas's sense of purpose and accomplishment. That must provide considerable satisfaction, she observes, knowing that your work has such direct importance. Thomas's eyes meet hers with an intensity that makes her heart race despite all her training in proper deportment. Yes, my lady. There is satisfaction in being useful, in contributing something of value to the world. The implication hangs between them unspoken but clearly understood, that Catherine's own existence, however privileged, lacks this sense of meaningful contribution. Rather than taking offense at what might be construed as criticism of her lifestyle, Catherine finds herself drawn to this different perspective on life's possibilities. These conversations, brief and carefully proper though they are, begin to occupy an increasingly important place in Catherine's thoughts. She finds herself looking forward to Thomas's visits with an eagerness that would shock her family if they suspected its true nature. When he is in the house, she feels more alive, more aware of her own thoughts and feelings than she has ever experienced before. Miss Whitmore, whose experience with aristocratic households has made her sensitive to undercurrents that others might miss, begins to notice Catherine's altered behavior with growing concern. The young lady's attention during lessons becomes increasingly distracted, and she has developed an unfortunate tendency to linger in corridors and common areas rather than remaining properly sequestered in the ladies' quarters of the house. "Catherine, my dear," Miss Whitmore observes during a particularly unfocused French lesson, "you seem rather preoccupied lately. I trust you are not allowing the unusual circumstances in the household to disturb your equilibrium." Catherine forces herself to focus on the conjugation of irregular verbs, recognizing the warning implicit in her governess's words. "I am perfectly well, Miss Whitmore. Perhaps I am simply eager for the completion of Father's business matters so that our routine might return to normal." "Indeed," Miss Whitmore replies with a meaningful look, "the sooner certain temporary arrangements conclude, the better for all concerned. Now, shall we continue with your French composition?" The warning is subtle but unmistakable, reminding Catherine of the boundaries that govern her world and the consequences of transgressing them. Yet even as she applies herself to her studies with renewed attention, she cannot banish thoughts of Thomas from her mind. She finds herself wondering about his life beyond the walls of Ashworth House, about his hopes and dreams, about the experiences that have shaped his character. One afternoon, while Thomas is working in the study and Catherine is supposedly engaged in watercolor painting in the morning room, she makes a decision that will alter the course of both their lives. Under the pretense of needing a book from the library, she ventures into the corridor where she can hear the quiet scratch of his pen as he works over the account books. The study door stands slightly ajar, and through the gap she can observe Thomas bent over the large mahogany desk, completely absorbed in his calculations. His profile reveals strong, regular features marked by concentration and intelligence, while his careful handling of her father's important documents demonstrates both competence and respect for the trust placed in him. Catherine stands transfixed by this glimpse of Thomas in his element, working with quiet efficiency to solve problems that her father's education and social position have not equipped him to handle. There is something deeply attractive about this display of practical competence, so different from the ornamental accomplishments that mark a gentleman of leisure. "Lady Catherine." Thomas's voice startles her from her reverie, and she realizes that he has become aware of her presence despite her attempts at discretion. "Is there something I might help you with?" Caught in her improper observation, Catherine feels heat rise in her cheeks as she searches for an acceptable explanation for her behavior. I needed a book from the library and heard sounds from the study. I wanted to ensure that you had everything necessary for your work." Thomas rises from his chair with that careful politeness that marks all his interactions with the family, but his eyes hold a warmth that suggests he is not entirely displeased by her concern. "That is very thoughtful, my lady. I believe I have everything I require, though I confess the complexity of some of these investments requires considerable concentration. You must find it tedious, spending so many hours with nothing but numbers and account books," Catherine ventures, moving slightly closer to the doorway while maintaining the pretense of casual concern. On the contrary, Thomas replies with a slight smile that transforms his serious features, "I find great satisfaction in bringing order to chaos, in making sense of complexity. Each column tells a story, each calculation reveals something about the choices and circumstances that created the current situation." This perspective on his work reveals an intellectual curiosity that Catherine has never encountered among the men of her acquaintance, who typically view business matters as necessary evils to be delegated to others. The idea that such prosaic activities might contain elements of story and discovery opens new possibilities in her mind. "What stories do our accounts tell?" she asks, genuinely curious about this novel way of viewing her family's affairs. Thomas hesitates, clearly aware that discussing the intimate details of aristocratic finances with the daughter of the house represents a significant breach of propriety. Yet Catherine's evident interest and the genuine nature of her curiosity seem to overcome his reservations. They tell of careful stewardship across generations, he says carefully, of investments made with an eye toward long-term stability rather than immediate profit. Your family's wealth has been built and preserved through prudent management and a deep understanding of how to balance risk with security. Catherine finds herself fascinated by this analysis, which reveals aspects of her family's history that she has never considered. And what of the present? What story do current circumstances tell? They tell of adaptation to changing times, Thomas replies, his voice warming as he discusses concepts that clearly interest him deeply. The end of the war has created new opportunities and new challenges. Those who can recognize and respond to these changes will prosper, while those who cling too rigidly to old patterns may find themselves left behind. The conversation has moved far beyond the bounds of propriety, yet neither participant seems inclined to return to safer territory. Catherine finds herself hungry for this glimpse into a world of ideas and practical knowledge that her traditional education has never provided, while Thomas appears to appreciate having someone show genuine interest in work that is usually dismissed as mere mechanical calculation. You speak as if you understand these matters from personal experience, Catherine observes, noting the conviction in his voice when he discusses economic change and adaptation. My family has felt the effects of such changes quite directly, Thomas admits, then pauses as if realizing how much he has revealed about his background. The war created opportunities for some while destroying the livelihoods of others. Understanding these patterns has become a matter of survival for people like me. This acknowledgement of the vast differences in their circumstances hangs between them, a reminder of the social gulf that separates their worlds. Yet rather than creating distance, this honesty seems to draw them closer together, creating a moment of genuine connection that transcends the artificial barriers of class and convention. The dangerous intimacy of their conversation is shattered by the sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor. Catherine quickly retreats from the study doorway, her heart pounding with a mixture of exhilaration and terror at how close she has come to complete impropriety. Thomas immediately returns to his work, his professional demeanor restored so quickly that their exchange might have been nothing more than imagination. Miss Whitmore appears around the corner, her sharp eyes taking in Catherine's flushed face and slightly disheveled appearance with the skill of someone trained to detect the smallest deviations from proper behavior. Catherine, my dear, I have been looking everywhere for you. Your watercolors require attention if they are to dry properly before this evening. Of course, Miss Whitmore, Catherine replies, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions racing through her. I was merely checking on, that is, I wanted to ensure that Mr. Blackwood had everything necessary for his work. The governess's expression suggests that she finds this explanation less than entirely convincing, but she merely nods and escorts Catherine back toward the morning room where abandoned painting supplies wait to provide evidence of more appropriate activities. That evening, as Catherine sits through another formal dinner featuring conversation about neighbors' marriages, hunting prospects, and political developments that affect their social circle, she finds her thoughts repeatedly returning to those few minutes of genuine intellectual exchange with Thomas. The contrast between his passionate engagement with ideas and the superficial pleasantries that characterize her usual interactions becomes increasingly stark. Lord Pemberton's son has been invited to dine, and he regales the table with accounts of his recent visit to London, where he attended parties and theatrical performances that represent the height of fashionable entertainment. His descriptions of these events, delivered with the casual assumption that everyone shares his values and interests, suddenly strike Catherine as profoundly shallow. The opera was quite magnificent, young Pemberton declares, though I confess I found the Italian rather tedious. One goes to see and be seen, after all, rather than to endure 3 hours of foreign singing. Catherine murmurs appropriate responses while privately wondering what Thomas might think of such an attitude toward art and culture. Would he find meaning and beauty in musical performances that Pemberton dismisses as mere social obligations? The question occupies her thoughts far more than the actual conversation taking place around the dinner table. After dinner, as the gentlemen retire for port and cigars while the ladies withdraw to the drawing room, Catherine finds herself unable to concentrate on the usual activities of needlework and genteel conversation. Miss Whitmore's attempts to engage her in discussion of household management and social obligations receive distracted responses that do nothing to allay the governess's growing concerns about her charge's state of mind. The following morning brings news that will accelerate the crisis building within Catherine's heart. Thomas arrives earlier than usual, explaining to Lord Ashworth that he has made significant progress with the financial reorganization and expects to complete his work within the next few days. The prospect of his departure from their household fills Catherine with an anguish that she struggles to understand or conceal. As the morning progresses, Catherine finds herself unable to maintain even the pretense of normal activity. Her French lesson deteriorates into distracted silence, her musical practice produces discordant notes that reflect her inner turmoil, and her attempts at ladylike correspondence result in ink blots and crossed-out lines that would shock anyone who saw them. Miss Whitmore's patience finally reaches its limit during what should have been a peaceful hour of embroidery work. "Catherine, this behavior is becoming intolerable. Whatever has gotten into you these past few days? You are acting like some love-struck kitchen maid rather than a lady of breeding and education." The governess's words, intended as a reprimand, instead provide Catherine with a moment of startling self-recognition. Love-struck, yes, that accurately describes the tumultuous feelings that have been building within her ever since Thomas Blackwood first walked into their house. The realization is both terrifying and liberating, forcing her to confront the true nature of her growing obsession with someone whose social position makes any romantic attachment impossible. "I am perfectly well," Catherine replies, though her trembling voice belies her words. "Perhaps I am simply feeling the effects of the season. Many ladies experience such fluctuations in mood during spring." Miss Whitmore's expression suggests that she finds this explanation completely inadequate, but before she can respond, a commotion in the corridor outside draws their attention. Raised voices, including her father's tone of barely controlled anger, indicate that something significant has occurred in the normally well-ordered household. The drawing-room door opens to admit Lord Ashworth, his face flushed with rage and his usual composure completely shattered. Behind him follows Thomas, his expression carefully controlled but his eyes reflecting a pain that Catherine immediately recognizes as profound. "Catherine," Lord Ashworth announces in a voice that brooks no argument, "Mr. Blackwood has something to say to you. I trust you will receive his words with the dignity appropriate to your station." Thomas steps forward, his posture erect despite the obvious distress of his circumstances. When he speaks, his voice carries the quiet dignity that Catherine has come to associate with his character, but underneath she can hear the weight of some terrible burden. "Lady Catherine," he begins, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that makes her heart stop, "I must apologize for any behavior on my part that might have given you cause to think, that is, I fear I may have overstepped the bounds of propriety in our recent conversations. If my conduct has been inappropriate, I deeply regret any discomfort it may have caused you or your family." The formal words carry a subtext that only Catherine can fully understand. He is acknowledging the connection that has grown between them while simultaneously denying its significance or possibility. The pain in his eyes tells her that this denial costs him dearly, but his sense of honor and awareness of their different social positions leaves him no alternative. "I assure you, Mr. Blackwood," Catherine replies, fighting to keep her voice steady, "that your conduct has been entirely proper at all times. I cannot imagine what might have given rise to any suggestion otherwise." Lord Ashworth's expression suggests that he finds both statements diplomatically acceptable while remaining unconvinced of their complete honesty. Nevertheless, he declares, "I believe it would be best if Mr. Blackwood's work here concludes as quickly as possible. I am sure he has other commitments that require his attention." "Indeed, my lord," Thomas agrees with that careful politeness that masks deeper emotions. "I expect to complete my review of your accounts within the next day or two. After that, there will be no need for my continued presence in your household." The finality of these words strikes Catherine like a physical blow, forcing her to confront the reality that Thomas will soon disappear from her life as suddenly as he entered it. The prospect of returning to her previous existence of social obligations and meaningless conversations fills her with despair that she struggles to conceal from the watching eyes of her father and governess. That will be most satisfactory, Lord Ashworth concludes. Miss Whitmore, perhaps you would escort Catherine to her room. I believe she could benefit from some quiet reflection on the events of recent days. As Catherine reluctantly follows her governess from the drawing room, she manages one final glance at Thomas. Their eyes meet for a moment that seems to stretch into eternity, and in that shared look she sees all the words that cannot be spoken, all the feelings that must remain forever unexpressed. Then the door closes between them, and Catherine finds herself being led upstairs like a prisoner returning to her cell. That evening, as Catherine sits by her bedroom window staring out at the gaslit streets below, she makes a decision that will change everything. Tomorrow, before Thomas completes his work and leaves forever, she must find a way to speak with him honestly about the feelings that have transformed her understanding of herself and her world. The prospect terrifies her, but the alternative, a lifetime of wondering what might have been, seems infinitely worse. The next morning dawns gray and threatening, as if nature itself reflects the emotional storm brewing within Ashworth House. Catherine awakens after a sleepless night, her mind churning with plans and possibilities, each more desperate and impractical than the last. The knowledge that Thomas will complete his work today and depart forever has crystallized her resolve into something approaching reckless determination. Miss Whitmore arrives early for what she clearly intends to be a day of intensive supervision, her sharp eyes taking in Catherine's pale complexion and obvious agitation with growing alarm. "My dear child," she begins in a tone reserved for particularly serious infractions, "I trust you spent yesterday evening reflecting on proper behavior and the importance of maintaining standards appropriate to your station in life." "Indeed I did," Catherine replies with perfect honesty, though her reflections led to conclusions that would horrify her governess if they were revealed. "I understand my situation quite clearly now." This response, delivered with unusual firmness, causes Miss Whitmore to study her charge more carefully. There is something different about Catherine this morning, a quality of resolution that the governess finds distinctly unsettling given recent events. The morning progresses with Catherine maintaining a facade of proper ladylike behavior while inwardly calculating how she might create an opportunity for private conversation with Thomas. Her lessons receive dutiful attention, her correspondence is completed without the previous day's telltale errors, and her manner suggests complete acceptance of the restrictions that govern her world. This apparent return to normalcy partly reassures Miss Whitmore, who begins to believe that the previous day's dramatic scene has succeeded in returning her charge to proper thinking. Yet something in Catherine's manner, a quality of suppressed energy, of waiting for the right moment, keeps the governess alert to potential problems. Thomas arrives for what everyone understands will be his final day in the Ashworth household. Catherine, positioned strategically in the morning room where she can observe the entrance hall through an open doorway, watches as he is escorted to the study for the completion of his work. His manner appears completely professional, giving no sign that yesterday's confrontation has affected him beyond reinforcing his awareness of proper boundaries. Yet Catherine, whose heightened sensitivity allows her to read nuances that others might miss, detects something in his posture that speaks of carefully controlled emotion. The way he carries his leather portfolio, the slight tension in his shoulders, the careful avoidance of looking toward areas of the house where he might encounter her, all suggest that he is not as unaffected by recent events as his professional demeanor would indicate. The hours pass with agonizing slowness as Catherine waits for an opportunity that seems increasingly unlikely to present itself. Miss Whitmore maintains closer supervision than usual, Lord Ashworth appears periodically to check on Thomas's progress, and the normal household routine provides no natural occasion for the kind of private conversation that Catherine desperately needs. By afternoon, as Catherine sits through another lesson in watercolor technique while her thoughts race through increasingly desperate scenarios, she realizes that conventional opportunities will not suffice. If she is to speak with Thomas before he leaves forever, she must create circumstances that defy every rule of proper behavior that has governed her life thus far. The decision, once made, brings a strange sense of calm that allows Catherine to focus on practical details rather than the enormity of what she is contemplating. She begins to formulate a plan that will require precise timing, considerable courage, and acceptance of consequences that could destroy her reputation and her future within aristocratic society. As evening approaches and Thomas prepares to present his completed work to Lord Ashworth, Catherine excuses herself from the drawing room where Miss Whitmore is reading aloud from a book of improving moral stories. Under the pretext of retrieving a handkerchief from her room, she slips away from her governess's supervision and makes her way toward the rear of the house where servants' stairs provide access to areas normally beyond her knowledge. The servants' quarters are a revelation to someone who has never ventured beyond the public areas of her own home. Plain wooden floors replace marble and Persian carpets, simple furniture serves functional purposes without ornamentation, and the air carries sense of cooking and cleaning that never penetrate the rarefied atmosphere of the family's living areas. Catherine's presence in these regions of the house causes considerable consternation among the staff, who are uncertain how to respond to such an unprecedented situation. Sarah, her lady's maid, appears from the servants' hall with an expression of complete bewilderment. "My lady. Whatever are you doing here? If you need something, you have only to ring and I will come immediately." "Sarah," Catherine says with the authority that her position provides even in these unusual circumstances, "I need your help with a matter of the utmost importance. I must speak with Mr. Blackwood before he leaves, and I require your assistance to arrange such a meeting without attracting attention from my father or Miss Whitmore." The request clearly shocks Sarah, whose understanding of proper behavior tells her that such a meeting would be highly inappropriate. Yet her genuine affection for Catherine, combined with recognition of her mistress's obvious distress, creates a conflict between duty and loyalty that she struggles to resolve. "My lady, surely such a conversation would be most improper. If your father discovered, the consequences could be severe for both of you, and for anyone who assisted in arranging such a meeting." "I understand the risks," Catherine replies with a determination that surprises even herself. "But I also understand that some things are more important than propriety. Please, Sarah. I have never asked anything of you that was not entirely proper, but I am asking this now." The plea, delivered with obvious sincerity and desperation, finally overcomes Sarah's reservations. Her own romantic nature, carefully suppressed during years of service in an aristocratic household, responds to the genuine emotion in Catherine's voice. "Very well, my lady. Mr. Blackwood is concluding his meeting with your father in the study. When he prepares to leave, I will ensure that he takes a route through the rear garden rather than the front entrance. There is a small summer house near the rose garden where you might speak privately for a few minutes without being observed from the main house." The plan, hastily conceived and fraught with danger, nevertheless provides Catherine with the opportunity she has been seeking. As twilight settles over London and the household prepares for the evening's activities, she makes her way through the garden paths to the small summer house that has served as a retreat for Ashworth women throughout several generations. The summer house, built in the classical style favored by Catherine's grandmother, provides a sheltered space surrounded by carefully maintained roses that fill the evening air with their perfume. Here, away from the watching eyes of family and servants, Catherine waits for what may be her only chance to speak honestly with the man who has unknowingly revolutionized her understanding of herself and her world. When Thomas appears on the garden path, his expression clearly shows his surprise at finding her waiting for him. He approaches slowly, his manner suggesting both pleasure at seeing her and awareness that this meeting represents a dangerous deviation from acceptable behavior. "Lady Catherine," he says quietly, his voice carrying warmth despite his obvious concern about their circumstances. "Sarah said that you wished to speak with me before I departed. I hope you understand that such a meeting places both of us in a potentially compromising position." "I understand completely," Catherine replies, her voice steadier than she expected given the magnitude of what she is about to attempt. "But I could not allow you to leave without, that is, I needed to say things that cannot be expressed within the bounds of normal social interaction." Thomas studies her face in the fading light, reading there a resolution that both thrills and alarms him. "My lady, whatever you wish to say, please consider carefully whether speaking such words is wise. Some things, once said, cannot be unsaid, and the consequences may extend far beyond this moment." "I have considered nothing else for days," Catherine responds, stepping closer to him despite every rule of propriety that should keep proper distance between them. "And I have concluded that I would rather face any consequences than live the rest of my life wondering what might have been." The words hang between them in the perfumed air of the garden, a declaration that acknowledges feelings that society insists cannot exist between people of their different stations. Thomas's expression reveals the conflict between his own emotions and his understanding of the impossibility of their situation. "Lady Catherine," he begins, his voice rough with suppressed emotion, "you must know that any feelings that might exist between us can lead nowhere. Your world and mine are separated by barriers that no amount of affection can overcome. Must they be?" Catherine asks, her question carrying the weight of genuine hope despite its apparent naivety. Is it truly impossible for two people to find happiness together if their hearts are united, regardless of the circumstances of their birth? The question reveals the depth of Catherine's innocence about the realities that govern their society, yet her sincerity makes it impossible for Thomas to dismiss her words as mere romantic fantasy. He struggles to find a response that will honor her feelings while making clear the insurmountable nature of their situation. Thomas takes a step closer to Catherine, close enough that she can see the pain and longing in his dark eyes, close enough to understand that his feelings mirror her own despite all the rational arguments against such an attachment. "Catherine," he says, dropping the formal address for the first time and speaking her name like a prayer, "if the world were different, if circumstances allowed, there is nothing I would want more than to spend my life proving myself worthy of your love. But we cannot ignore reality simply because we wish it were otherwise." The use of her given name sends a thrill through Catherine that makes her feel more alive than any compliment or attention from men of her own class ever has. In this simple gesture of intimacy, she hears acknowledgement of feelings that transform her understanding of what love might truly mean. "Then we must work to change reality," she declares with the passionate conviction of someone who has never been forced to accept limitations imposed by circumstances beyond her control. Surely two people who care for each other can find a way to overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. Thomas reaches out as if to touch her face, then stops himself as he remembers the impossibility of their situation. "My dearest Catherine, your faith in love's power to conquer all obstacles does you credit, but it cannot change the fundamental facts of our different positions. You are the daughter of a lord, destined to marry within your own class and take your place in aristocratic society. I am a man who earns his living through work that gentlemen consider beneath their notice. The gulf between us cannot be bridged by affection alone. Cannot it?" Catherine challenges, her voice gaining strength from her growing determination. "What if I choose to bridge that gulf myself? What if I decide that love and genuine companionship matter more than social position and arranged marriages?" The suggestion is so radical, so completely contrary to everything that governs aristocratic life, that Thomas initially cannot comprehend what she is proposing. When understanding dawns, his expression reflects both wonder at her courage and horror at the magnitude of what she is contemplating. "Catherine, you cannot be serious. To abandon your family, your position, your future, the sacrifice would be too great. You would lose everything that has defined your life, everything that provides security and meaning to your existence." "Would I?" Catherine asks, moving closer still until only propriety itself stands between them. "Or would I gain something infinitely more valuable, the chance to live authentically, to share my life with someone who values me for myself rather than for my father's wealth and connections?" The temptation to accept what she offers wars with Thomas's understanding of the devastating consequences such a choice would bring to both their lives. He knows that Catherine's romantic vision of their life together cannot account for the harsh realities they would face, the social ostracism, the financial struggles, the constant awareness that her sacrifice had cost her everything she had been raised to value. "My darling girl," he says softly, the endearment escaping despite his efforts to maintain rational distance, "you speak of losing only things that you have never truly appreciated because you have never been without them. Your family's love and support, your place in society, the security that comes with wealth and position, these are not mere ornaments that can be discarded without consequence. Are they not?" Catherine replies, her voice carrying new conviction born from the clarity that love has brought to her understanding of her own values. "What good is my family's love if it is conditional upon my absolute obedience to their wishes? What value does social position hold if it requires me to deny my own heart and accept a loveless marriage for the sake of maintaining appearances?" Thomas recognizes in her words an echo of his own long-held beliefs about the superficiality of aristocratic values, yet hearing them from someone who stands to lose so much by embracing such thinking fills him with both admiration and terror. He realizes that Catherine has thought more deeply about these matters than he initially understood, that her feelings represent genuine conviction rather than temporary rebellion against restrictive circumstances. "And what of the practical considerations?" he asks, making one final attempt to help her understand the full implications of what she is suggesting. "I can offer you comfort, perhaps, but nothing approaching the luxury you have always known. Our life together would require sacrifices and compromises that you cannot fully imagine." Catherine's response reveals the depth of transformation that love has worked within her previously sheltered understanding of life's possibilities. "Thomas, in these past few days I have learned something that all my education and social training never taught me, that a life lived authentically, in partnership with someone who truly understands and values you, provides a richness that no amount of material luxury can match." The sincerity of her conviction, combined with the obvious courage required to express such revolutionary thoughts, finally overcomes Thomas's resistance to believing that their love might indeed have a future. He realizes that Catherine has genuinely chosen him and the life they might build together over all the advantages that her birth and position could provide. "Catherine," he whispers, finally allowing himself to reach out and touch her face with a tenderness that speaks of months of suppressed longing, "if you are truly certain that this is what you want, if you understand and accept the difficulties we will face, then I cannot deny my own heart any longer. I love you with everything I am, and I would be honored to spend my life proving myself worthy of the trust you place in me." The declaration, spoken in the gathering dusk of the rose garden, marks the moment when two people from completely different worlds choose to create a new world together. Their first kiss, gentle and reverent despite the passion that underlies it, seals a commitment that defies every convention of their society. Yet even as they embrace their newfound happiness, both understand that declaring their love is only the beginning of the challenges they must face. Catherine's family will not accept her choice gracefully, and society will punish them both for their defiance of established hierarchies. The path ahead will require courage, determination, and an unwavering commitment to the belief that genuine love can indeed triumph over artificial barriers. "We must be very careful about how we proceed," Thomas warns as they reluctantly separate, awareness of their exposed position returning despite the intoxication of finally acknowledged love. "Your father will not react kindly to news of our attachment, and we must have a plan that provides for your safety and security regardless of his response." Catherine nods, understanding that their love story cannot end with this romantic declaration in a garden summerhouse. Real life requires practical planning and careful consideration of consequences that their hearts would prefer to ignore. "I have been thinking about such matters," she admits. "I have some jewelry and personal items that could be converted to funds if necessary. And surely your reputation in financial matters could provide opportunities for employment in areas where my family's influence would not extend." Thomas is both impressed and concerned by evidence that Catherine has indeed thought practically about their future together. Her willingness to consider such details demonstrates genuine commitment to their relationship, yet it also emphasizes the magnitude of the sacrifices she is prepared to make. "We will find a way," he promises, his voice carrying the determination of someone who has overcome significant obstacles before. "Together, we will build a life that honors both love and practical necessity. It will not be easy, but it will be real, and it will be ours." As they make plans for a clandestine meeting the following day to finalize arrangements for their future together, neither notices the figure watching from an upstairs window of the main house. Miss Whitmore, whose concerns about Catherine's behavior led her to search for her missing charge, has witnessed enough of their garden encounter to understand that her worst fears about the young lady's attachment to the temporary secretary have been realized. The governess retreats from the window with her mind already formulating the report she must make to Lord Ashworth, knowing that the information she carries will likely destroy the happiness she has just observed while preserving the social order that she has devoted her life to maintaining. The next morning brings the crisis that Catherine and Thomas have been dreading yet expecting. Lord Ashworth's thunderous summons to his study, delivered by a grim-faced footman, provides clear warning that their secret has been discovered. Catherine descends the stairs with the dignity befitting her station, yet her inner resolve remains unshaken despite her awareness of the storm about to break. Her father's study, which has always represented the seat of unquestioned authority within their household, now becomes the arena where old certainties will clash with new convictions. Lord Ashworth stands behind his massive desk like a judge preparing to pronounce sentence, his face reflecting a mixture of rage, disappointment, and genuine bewilderment at his daughter's incomprehensible behavior. "Catherine," he begins, his voice barely controlled despite obvious efforts to maintain aristocratic composure, "I have received information about your conduct that I find almost impossible to believe. Miss Whitmore tells me that she observed you yesterday evening in conversation with Mr. Blackwood under circumstances that can only be described as completely inappropriate." "Yes, father," Catherine replies with calm honesty that clearly surprises him. "I did speak with Mr. Blackwood in the garden before his departure from our household." The straightforward admission, delivered without excuse or apology, seems to momentarily unbalance Lord Ashworth's prepared tirade. He had expected denials, tears, perhaps pleading for forgiveness, not this composed acknowledgement of behavior that violates every principle of proper conduct. "And what, may I ask, was so urgent that it required you to risk your reputation and your family's honor for the sake of conversation with a man so far beneath your station?" Catherine draws upon reserves of courage that she never knew she possessed as she prepares to defend not only her actions but the love that motivated them. "I spoke with him because I have discovered that I love him, father, and he loves me. I could not allow him to leave without expressing feelings that have transformed my understanding of what my life might become." The declaration strikes Lord Ashworth like a physical blow, robbing him temporarily of speech as he struggles to comprehend that his carefully raised daughter has apparently lost all reason. When he recovers enough to respond, his voice carries a coldness that Catherine has never heard before. "Love? You speak of love with a man whose entire yearly income would not cover the cost of one of your evening gowns. A man whose family background is so obscure that he cannot even claim gentle birth. Catherine, I fear that your inexperience with the world has led you to mistake temporary fascination for genuine affection." "I have not mistaken anything," Catherine replies firmly, her voice gaining strength from her conviction. "I know my own heart, father, and I know Thomas's character. He possesses qualities of integrity, intelligence, and genuine goodness that I have never encountered among the men you consider suitable matches for me." Lord Ashworth begins pacing behind his desk, his agitation evident despite his attempts to maintain authority through formal intimidation. "Integrity? Goodness? My dear child, these are luxuries that only wealth and position can afford to value. Without the security that comes from proper marriage and social standing, such noble qualities become irrelevant when faced with the practical necessities of survival. Perhaps, Catherine acknowledges, but I would rather face those practical necessities alongside someone I truly love and respect than live in luxury with someone who views me merely as a means to advance his own social position." The conversation continues for nearly an hour, with Lord Ashworth alternating between rage, pleading, and rational argument in his attempts to convince Catherine to abandon what he sees as a temporary infatuation that threatens to destroy her future. Yet with each argument he presents, Catherine's responses reveal the depth of thought she has given to her decision and her genuine understanding of the consequences she is choosing to accept. Finally, recognizing that conventional approaches have failed to shake his daughter's resolve, Lord Ashworth resorts to the ultimate weapon available to aristocratic fathers, the threat of complete disinheritance and social exile. "Very well," he declares with cold finality, "if you persist in this madness, you leave me no choice. Should you choose to throw away your birthright for the sake of this inappropriate attachment, you will do so without family support of any kind. You will be dead to me, dead to your mother, dead to everyone who has ever known you as Lady Catherine Ashworth. Is this man truly worth such a price?" Catherine meets her father's gaze steadily, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she is about to lose. "Yes, father. He is worth that price and more. I choose love over luxury, genuine companionship over social convenience, and an authentic life over one prescribed by others' expectations." The finality of her declaration marks the end of one chapter of Catherine's life and the beginning of another. Lord Ashworth's expression reveals his recognition that he has truly lost his daughter to convictions he cannot understand or accept. Yet beneath his anger and disappointment, there is also a grudging admiration for the courage she has shown in defending her choice. 6 months later, in a small but comfortable house in Bath where Thomas has established himself as a private secretary and financial advisor to merchants and professionals, Catherine, now Mrs. Blackwood, tends a garden that she planted with her own hands. The simple cotton dress she wears would have shocked the fashionable world she once inhabited, yet her face reflects a contentment and genuine happiness that her expensive silks and satins never provided. Thomas returns each evening to a home filled with love, conversation, and the simple pleasures that come from a life built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Their reduced circumstances require economies that Catherine's former existence never imagined, yet they have discovered that true wealth lies in finding someone whose company makes every day a joy rather than an obligation. Sometimes, when the afternoon light falls across their modest drawing room in exactly the right way, Catherine thinks of the grand mansion where she was raised and the family she chose to leave behind. The sadness is real and will never entirely disappear, yet it is overshadowed by gratitude for the courage that led her to choose love over convention. Their story becomes a whispered legend in certain circles, the tale of a noble lady who gave up everything for love and found that everything she gained was worth infinitely more than anything she lost. In a world governed by rigid rules and ancient prejudices, Catherine and Thomas prove that the human heart recognizes no barriers save those that individuals choose to accept. Their love story continues to unfold day by day, not in the grand gestures of romantic fiction but in the quiet satisfaction of two people who chose each other freely and built a life together based on genuine understanding, mutual respect, and the revolutionary belief that true love can indeed conquer all obstacles when both hearts are equally committed to making such triumph possible. As twilight falls over their small garden, Catherine and Thomas sit together planning their future, perhaps children who will grow up knowing that love matters more than social position, perhaps travels to places where their unconventional story will inspire others to examine their own assumptions about what makes life truly valuable. Their happiness serves as proof that sometimes the greatest courage is found not in accepting the limitations that society imposes, but in daring to believe that individual choice and genuine love can create possibilities that transcend every barrier except those erected by fear and convention. In choosing each other, they chose a life of authenticity over artifice, love over luxury, and genuine partnership over socially approved arrangement. Their story reminds us that the most profound revolutions often begin in the human heart, spreading outward to transform not only individual lives but the very foundations upon which society builds its assumptions about what matters most in the brief time we have to create meaning and happiness in this world.